Hi everyone, it's early February here in Northwest Alabama and swarm season is going to be here before you know it. So today I want to take a few minutes and kind of revisit the first video I made about 2 years ago. In that video I talked about the evolution of my swarm catching experience, which is one of the very good strengths of my beekeeping art, is catching and trapping swarms. My first experiences with my grandfather and the first few years of my beekeeping, when I would catch swarms, if I couldn't reach them off the ground, I would either take a handle or something and knock the limb, or take a .22 rifle and shoot the limb off, letting it fall down. Well, in those cases, the odds of getting the swarm are probably, in my experience, about 25 or 30%. The odds are not very good. Fast forward to about 2010 or 11, the first gentleman I ever mentored in beekeeping, which was like the third year of my beekeeping experience. But anyway, one day we was talking on the phone and we saw this apparatus in a magazine, because the problem of reaching swarms up high off the ground, I always looked at those as $100 bills hanging on the limb up there. So I wanted to figure out how to capture those swarms. So we'd seen in one of the bee catalogs they sold a apparatus which involved some electrical conduit, a 5-gallon bucket with a lid and rope, in which was designed to reach up and you hit the limb, the bees fall in the bucket, you pull the rope, and the bucket's tied on the lid in such a manner that it pulls the lid up over the bucket and you let it down. And that worked pretty good, but it was pretty heavy, and we wound up switching to 1-inch aluminum conduit. I did with that catch swarms up pretty high, 30-35 feet, by using a step ladder in the bed of my truck. Even though that worked good, it was pretty heavy. For example, when I caught those bees up that high, you're having to deal with the weight of the aluminum conduit plus 3 to 5 pound of bees in that bucket 30 foot away. As you try to let that down, I was simply folding up that aluminum conduit, and I would have to find a couple of trees and straighten it back out. If you can imagine how much 4 or 5 pound of bees weigh on the end of a 25-foot pole, it's pretty heavy. My good friend Ricky Grace, who was that gentleman that was the first person I mentored, I don't know how this idea hit him, but in an effort to save weight, he was shopping at I think Big Lots, and this is actually the can that he made me several years ago. It's lasted this long. I call it an office waste can, but it's just a metal mesh garbage can. It's dark in color. This one happens to be black. When he saw that, he got the idea to try to make something lighter out of this, and at the time he thought about this mesh would give the bees plenty of ventilation to breathe. So he purchased it and put together this apparatus here. All this is that metal mesh garbage can. It has a volume of about 4 gallons probably, I'm just guessing there. And he took a paint roller, knocked the ends off, and kind of bent it around to where it would conform to this, and then used a combination of miner's tape and Gorilla Tape and taped that to it. He made it and tried it a couple times, and it worked really good. And he called me and just told me how unbelievably good this worked. Oh, and I left out this part. He bought one of these painting extension poles that you can get at most any hardware store, and this thing will telescope out to about 23 feet long. So that was the reason for putting the paint roller handle on here. That way you can screw it on this handle and then reach up and get your swarm. So I can stand flat-footed and catch a swarm of bees upwards of 25-28 foot off the ground safely. I don't have to shoot the limb off. I don't have to climb a ladder. You'll have about 50-60 bucks in this thing, but the first swarm you catch at that height, in my view, it pays for the construction of this equipment. This has been the most amazing piece of equipment that I've encountered in my beekeeping operation. Now, my friend Ricky carries one of these around in his pickup, and he got some big rubber bands and some towels, and if he happens on a swarm or gets a call when he's out, he'll shake the swarm into this bucket and then put the towel over it with a rubber band. If all the bees fall in there, he can just simply throw it in his, over in the cab of his truck and take it home. Or if he needs to, he can set it on the ground and the bees will come settle on the outside of it in addition to the ones that's in there, and they'll remain calm. Quite by accident, we discovered the magic of this bucket. Where the bees would want to fly out of the 5-gallon bucket, the bees are pretty reluctant to fly out of this. They, in fact, will cling to this. Over the years, I've learned I'll even take some lemongrass oil and kind of rub on this. When I catch swarms, I'll rack it up against the limb. Most of the bees will fall in there, and I'll just stand it up nearby. I don't even worry about dumping it in the box right away. The vast majority of the bees will come settle even on the outside of this, and I can lower it down and dump it into the hive. So that's kind of where I come up with the Scoop and Score name. And being I didn't use this last year, it's acquired a couple of dirt daubers nest in it. It is slightly bent up here from where I hit some limbs a little bit harder than I should have, but it's still in great shape. So now I'll cover the construction of this. So it's just a paint roller, and it's taped to this metal mesh garbage can, and we have this paint extension pole. Now, something that's very important to the life of this handle that I learned right off is this handle is going to have reinforcement, or you won't catch no more than a couple of swarms. So what I wound up doing is taping several layers of Gorilla Tape around it tightly, and then I took a water hose clamp and clamped it on top of that. Since I've done that, I've been using this same handle for 6 or 7 years, so that gave it enough reinforcement and durability to withstand the shock of those bees falling in there, or if I have to rack a limb. Although I haven't tried it, I think you could actually hang some of these in a tree and they would work kind of like a Russian scion. I think you could actually lure a swarm to this, especially with the little comb up in here and some lemongrass oil. I had an instance that happened a few years ago when I had just caught a swarm of this, and I'd use the last of my frames so I could stay ahead. I went inside and built 10 frames and put the foundations in right then. That took me probably 20 minutes. I had neglected to fold this back down and take it apart. I just leaned it up against the tree, and the bucket was up in the air about 20 foot. Well, when I'd come back out, one of these colonies that was here at the time issued a swarm, and the swarm went up and chose and settled on this bucket that I had leaning in that tree. Even though it had several other options of a place to settle, it went to this bucket and settled on the outside of it. That was very surprising to me, and that's why I think, this might could even be used like a Russian scion. If you want to check out my playlist, I've got several demonstration videos of this where I catch any swarm I catch pretty much from 2.5 foot off the ground up to about 30 feet. The swarms, at least part of that swarm is going to see the inside of this bucket. When I catch swarms, I won't cut any limbs off. I'd rather bump the swarm into this and then dump it in the hive and leave that limb there. The bee swarms seem to want to go to the same limbs that they swarmed to before, so if I cut those limbs off, the bees are going to have to select different places. So especially if they're low to the ground, I will not cut any limbs or trees down that are easy to get to, especially if I can stand on the ground and get them. The weakness of this is if the swarm settles in on a trunk or they're on a very big limb, it struggles with that. But if the swarm is out on the edge of a limb, basically, if they're like that and you can touch it, you got about a 95% chance of capturing that swarm, as long as you can touch it. So to kind of show you how I use this telescoping pole has 3 sections. So obviously it's variable depending on how high the swarm is. So if I have to telescope it out, I want to use the biggest sections of pipe first. And then if I have to go all the way out, I'd rather go all the way out with this bigger one and then use the very minimum amount of this upper section, because it's a smaller diameter and it's going to bend quite a bit more. You'll be surprised how much this bends if you've got it out 20 foot and about 2.5, 3 pound of bees in that garbage can. It's you wonder if it's going to break or not, but so far it hasn't. So right here, for demonstration purposes, if I had a swarm out on the end of this limb right here, that's probably about 7 or 8 foot above my head right now. If I didn't have this tool, I probably would struggle to get that swarm. So with this, I can easily reach up there, and I want to get that bucket under the bulk of bees, and then just simply rack that limb, and they'll fall in there. Now, if a bunch of them fall out, I can stand that up against that limb and let the bees settle on it. But usually in this case, this is pretty easy to reach. I would go ahead and ease it down and have my hive right here, and I dump the bees, some of them in the front and quite a few of them at the entrance, and get those bees fanning. I may rack it another time or two depending on how many bees go back up there, and then I'll start trying to figure out by the way the bees are acting if the queen is here or up there, and then usually I'll have that answer within 5 minutes of the initial dump. If your swarm's further in, let's just say your swarm's like right up in there, it's going to be a little bit more challenging to get to. You could rack your bees like that, and then you can kind of take advantage of the limbs, and I'll let that hang there like that for a few minutes, and those bees will settle. The bees that you knock to the ground, they'll go back up and they'll settle on the outside of that bucket, and even the ones inside will start fanning. I've noticed that. And you can give it 5 or 10 minutes, and then you can ease it away from there, and then ease it down. Now when you do this part right here, it can be tricky if you've got a pretty good load of bees in there. So you got to keep the arm closest to the bucket stretched out, because it's going to be a pretty good bit of tension, and you try to ease it down, and it kind of takes a little bit of coordination to make that do it smoothly, and then you can just bring it down and dump it. That's a couple of demonstrations of ways I would use it. And if you go back and revisit that first video, it's about a 6-minute video, and I got a little bit more detail on it in there, and I actually demonstrate using it in that video as well. But this is a great tool and improving on safety in catching swarms in the springtime. I've been involved in climbing ladders, catching swarms in my younger days, and even though swarms are valuable, it's not worth getting hurt over. This will definitely greatly improve your swarm catching at a reasonable price and much improved safety. And this metal mesh garbage can is definitely a wonderful tool to catch swarms with. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to join me for this video today, and we'll catch you on the next one.